Okay, so that's the context that I want you to approach watching the movie Casablanca. Um, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but when you watch it, you don't have to because I can monitor this. But I want you to, when you watch it, I want you to Rick is America. Think of Rick as America. That's it. Casablanca comes out in 1942. Just real briefly, let me give you a little bit more historical context. So Germany had conquered France by the summer of 1940. It conquered much of the rest of Western Europe as well. Spain stayed neutral. But so Germany captures France. When it captures France, though, it lets the southeast portion of France. It's still governed by French. And the reason it's controlled by Germans, but the Germans allow local control. It's called Vichy France because of one of the figures that was involved, one of the French figures that was involved in controlling France. And I'll put up a map of Vichy France if you want to see it. So the reason that Hitler let the French control a portion of France after he conquered it, after his army conquered it, was that it's a pain in the ass to run a territory. I mean, you need water, you need police, you need someone to pick up the garbage. Just the day-to-day administration of running the countries is just it's difficult. So what Hitler did when he conquered France, he told the French, okay, I'll let you run the local affairs of this portion of France. Although, of course, the Germans always controlled that portion of France. It wasn't like that, the Vichy France, that region wasn't independent at all. But on a day-to-day basis, it was run by the French. And then after the U.S. Moved into North Africa in 1942, the Germans rolled into Vichy France, and it doesn't exist anymore. So Vichy France didn't exist for the Cold War. Okay, what's this have to do with Casablanca? Well, Vichy France was also the administrative apparatus that's running the French colonies in North Africa. And one of the French colonies in North Africa was Casablanca, right? Was the city of Casablanca. So that's why what you have in this movie, the context of the movie is the French have captured Paris, they captured France, but they're allowing the French on a day-to-day basis to run portions of France, including its colonies in North Africa. That's why you have the French policeman who becomes, Bogart sees his nemesis and then becomes his friend. So that explains the context, and that's often very confusing for students. They don't realize that at least a portion of France was run, again, on an administrative basis, on a local basis, by the French. Although the Germans were really behind the scenes, or not so behind the scenes, running the show. So again, to explain, the French had conquered France, they had let portions of France be run on a day-to-day basis by French officials. This is Vichy France. And they also let the French officials run French colonies in North Africa, such as the city of Casablanca. Okay, so that kind of explains the wider context. Now, what I want you to look for in the movie, to go back to what I was saying, in this movie, Bogart is America. He represents America. And Ingrid Bergman represents Europe in this movie. And also, it's her husband, I guess, as well. But the key relationship, of course, is between Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. And what I want you to trace is Humphrey Bogart's movement away from isolationism. Note the lines at the beginning of the movie where Humphrey Bogart he says these things like, I don't trust anyone, I can't remember the exact line, but just got to be alert to these lines. And then watch his trajectory about getting involved in the war. And what Humphrey Bogart, what he really stands for is the United States. And this isn't a government propaganda. This was a movie. It was made by Hollywood. The government wasn't selling this message, which is one of the things that makes it the most effective. It's kind of an organic film in the sense that it's made by Hollywood. It's not government propaganda, but it certainly supports what the government is wanting the United States to believe and to embrace. And that's not only World War II, but in particular, the war against the Germans, because why should we go to war against Germany when it's Japan bombed us? And we'll talk about that issue later. So when you watch this movie, and we're going to talk about it next week, watch Bogart's trajectory from isolationism to involvement in the war. How is Ingrid Bergman? Did she represent Europe? How is Europe seen here? Is Europe seen as strong? Is Europe seen as needy? So even if you've seen Casablanca before, watch it from that point of view, a story of the trajectory of the U.S. from isolationism into involvement in Europe. Ingrid Bergman, what is she? If she represents Europe, how is Europe portrayed here? To a lesser extent, how about her hero husband? And so watch it with those lenses. And I think, you might find it very interesting to watch it in that context. It's a piece of popular culture. It's not government propaganda. But, popular culture actually is much more powerful than government propaganda because government propaganda is usually so clunky. So that's why I'm having you watch Casablanca, and I'm going to have you watch it this week because it tells the story of the trajectory through Reagan's case, from being an isolationist to being involved in World War II. And the story of Reagan is the story of the United States, and in some ways the story of the story of Europe, as well as her husband as well. So this is why I'm having you watch Casablanca. Watch it through those eyes. And then the other thing I want you to watch for, a couple of people have been in a previous class and seen this movie. This is very interesting. It doesn't exactly have to do with World War II in Europe, but who cares? Keep an eye on it. What do you think about Sam, the piano player in this movie? Do you see Sam? Does this show something of racial progress? How do you see Sam? Do you see Sam as a friend? Do you see Sam as a servant? Do you see dignified? What is this saying? What's Casablanca? How is Sam, African American, of course, how is he being portrayed in this movie? Does this show sign of kind of racial progress? Because the U.S. has to come into the war united, and it needs its African American population. So watch the character of Sam, and what do you think his story is? How is he being portrayed? Is it a dignified portrayal? Is it the same old thing? Is he just a servant? And the last thing I'll say in this podcast is this movie is very multicultural. It's got a lot of Muslim stuff in it, which I never noticed when I watched it as a kid. Of course, it takes place in a Muslim country. So it's a very international movie as well. So watch it through the lens of let's pretend that it's 1942 and you're watching this movie. And it's telling you the story of the United States and its trajectory. Okay, that's the last podcast for today.